Hi, it's Kim Boon. In the past week, the drama over Agoda's layoff has been front and center of Singapore's headlines. If you missed it, Agoda laid off about 50 employees here, and somehow the media got hold of the severance agreement, and apparently, affected staff were told they could not report the matter to any government agencies nor make claims against the company. And if they did, they lost the severance or even had to pay back in full. So to me, that sounds a lot like corporate bullying. But today, I don't really want to rehash what has already been chewed to death in the headlines. Instead, I want to explore the uncomfortable questions that this whole episode raises. CNE spoke to one retrenched employee who alleged that Agoda's Singapore Customer Experience Group existed mainly to satisfy local workforce quotas. And by keeping that unit in Singapore, the company could hire more foreigners under the S-Bar scheme. So if true, that's not just something we talk about over coffee chats. That's a structural issue, and I want to talk about that. So, one of the biggest forces reshaping employment in the last decade is the rise of the global workforce. So, the old geographical boundaries don't matter so much anymore. A company in Singapore could hire an analyst in India, a designer in Malaysia, or even a software engineer in China just as easily as they can hire someone locally. And in this sense, everyone's kind of competing on a global scale. And I recently spoke with a recruiter from a Chinese MNC who was in Singapore looking for talent. So I asked her who her primary targets were. So her answer, Chinese nationals studying in local universities. And I was quite surprised, because surely there's no shortage of talent back in China. But she explained that there's this big pool of overseas Chinese who studied or worked abroad, and her job was to reverse the brain drain, to bring them back home. So think about that. MNCs in China have teams that specialize in reabsorbing overseas talent. So I started thinking about Singaporeans. Yes, some of us work overseas, but how many graduates fresh out of school or even people that are currently in the workforce are thinking about overseas opportunities? I think most of us don't, right? Even though we have some unique advantages. So take the H1B1 visa in US, a little known visa under the Singapore-US Free Trade Agreement. It allows Singaporeans to work in specialty occupations like tech with a 5,400 quota that is rarely ever used, and is valid for 18 months, renewable indefinitely. And unlike the regular H1B, there's no lottery. So for a Singaporean software engineer dreaming of San Jose, the world's tech capital, that's an open door. But yet hardly anyone talks about it. And that's the irony. While local talent is flowing into Singapore, chasing opportunities here, Singaporeans are still largely competing in the same pool decade after decade. And that brings us back to Agoda. The government requires companies to hire a certain number of Singaporeans before they can bring in foreign talent. So in some ways, that's affirmative action. But let's be clear, companies comply because it is in their best interest, not our goodwill. So as the retrenched employee told CNA, Agoda disposed of them when they were no longer of value or when cheaper options became available. So that's cruel, but it's also kind of the reality of the global workforce. Because somewhere in the world, there's always going to be a lower cost option. And if Singaporeans are only competitive because of quota protection and not because of their own merits, then the music will stop at some point. It's a bit like car manufacturing in China. In the 90s and 2000s, automakers rushed in for the cheap labor, cheap land, and the big incentives. But by the 2010s to the 2020s, costs had gone up and factories started to shift to Vietnam. Yet China stayed attractive not because it was still cheap, but because of its massive domestic market. And the lesson here is simple. The cost can rise, but value must remain. And if Singaporeans are expensive, but if we continue to provide real value, we will remain attractive to employers. Now, I said this before, unemployment in Singapore is less of a Tan Si Ling problem than it is a Desmond Lee problem. Minister Tan, in charge of manpower, was handed a lousy set of cards. The state of the global economy, cyclical downturns, and things that are somewhat uncontrollable. And that's why I see stopgap measures like the graduate trainee schemes that are useful for plugging short-term gaps, but not a structural fix. I think the structural fix lies upstream in education, and that's where Minister Desmond Lee comes in. And I firmly believe the root cause of unemployment lies in how we're preparing our people. And unlike most zero-sum employment debates between employers and employees, education is different. Education creates new value. And I was once speaking with my company's senior management and a foreigner who said he chose to have his kids educated in Singapore. Why? Because here, integrity is ingrained. In some countries, cutting corners, even cheating is tolerated or even viewed as a way of getting ahead in life. In Singapore, it is just not acceptable. And that's the strength of our education system. But if we can ingrain values so deeply, why can't we do the same with skills? For decades, education ministers have said graduates need better soft skills. And yet here we are in 2025 still talking about it. Somehow, soft skills can only be magically acquired in the fire of the workplace, and that's complete nonsense. If schools thought that golf were the guaranteed path to career success, you can bet that it will be on every CCA list tomorrow. Yet after decades, we are still unable to crack the soft skill gap. So let Minister Tan fight the fires downstream, but fix the pipeline upstream. Otherwise, 10 years from now, we'll still be recycling the same complaints about hard skills, soft skills, and whatever is the next buzzword of the future. And of course, the onus isn't really just on employees. Employers need to hold themselves to a higher standard too. Take Agoda. The company said that they categorically refute allegations that any warnings were issued. But let's be honest, take a look at the severance clause itself. If it says do A and will do B, any reasonable person will see that as a warning. And this didn't need to have to be a PR disaster. Agoda could have offered a fair package and let employees go with dignity. Instead, now it's a full-blown storm involving the MOM, the TAFEP, and the whole alphabet soup of agencies. All because someone thought in 2025 that people wouldn't talk about it, in the age of social media where nothing is secret anymore. And while we're on support, can I just add one thing? If the company truly means it when they say that they will provide every support to terminated employees, why not help them ensure severance isn't taxed? It's a small gesture, but it would have showed real empathy to employees who are already stressed out about losing their jobs. And even if Agoda doesn't care about employees, it should care about itself. The company said that layoffs were about efficiency, but this episode has destroyed its brand equity in Singapore. And the next time I want to book a flight or hotel with so many options available, why would I pick Agoda? To me, they now look like a company that bullies that little guy, and I could be the next little guy that they bully. So whatever efficiency that Agoda hoped to achieve will be offset and likely outweighed by the commercial damage from this fiasco. So yes, very disappointed with Agoda, but other Agodas will keep popping up in the headlines until we fix the structural issues underneath. And COVID has taught companies that they can do more with less. And in today's world of fewer roles, we have to stay competitive if we want to stay relevant. So employees have a role, employers have a role, and the government also has a role to play. But the real game changer lies upstream in education. Because if we don't fix this at the root, we'll keep seeing the same cycle where foreign talent gets picked over Singaporeans, blame games between employees, employers, and government flying in every direction, and eventually something breaks. And when it does, it will not be pretty. So this is today's Red Dot Perspective, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section of what you think. And I'll see you guys at the next episode.